A very warm welcome to this, the first film in our Single Skin Facades series, in which we consider the key characteristics of building shells. The building shell forms the boundary between the environment outside of a building and its interior. The conditions on either side of this transition can be very different. The key characteristics of the building shell depend on the environmental conditions prevailing outside of it. These environmental conditions vary geographically, season by season, and sometimes over much shorter periods. The differences between inside and out can sometimes even be reversed. Let us take a look at these differences. When the weather outside is wet, we want the inside of our buildings to be dry, so the building shell must be able to keep the rain out. Conversely, if conditions inside the building are wet, the shell may be required to keep water inside the building. When the weather outside is cold, we need to heat the interior to achieve reasonably comfortable conditions inside. You already know that heat is lost through the shell of a building by means of transmission. The job of the shell is to keep these losses as low as possible. In other regions, and in the summer here in Germany now too, the priority is to provide protection against the heat of the sun and, where possible, to cool the interior of a building. The process of heat transfer is reversed. The movement of air can be very unpleasant and have a significant adverse effect on our comfort. In areas of strong wind, the building shell must keep the wind at bay in order to avoid drafts. Even if there is no wind at all outside, however, uncomfortable drafts can still be created inside a building by ventilation units in an auditorium or theatre, for example. Here too, the building shell must be airtight to limit drafts and prevent cold exterior air from being sucked in from the outside. The building shell is often required to compensate for differences in light conditions inside and outside, or vice versa. If you want to sleep while it's light outside, after working a night shift or late-night partying, for example, it's helpful if openings can be blacked out. Conversely, you may want to stop light from spilling out of a building or prevent those outside from seeing that the interior is lit. Hazardous situations can also occur both inside and outside. As a general rule, interiors are protected from such external dangers as wild animals, bad weather, or intruders. There are some situations, however, in which the danger comes from within. We've already seen the example of the detention cell in our Chemnitz police station, for example. The building shell must also facilitate escape from a building, particularly in case of fire, by providing appropriate emergency exits and by guaranteeing structural stability for a certain period of time. It must also be possible to limit the volume of noise travelling in either direction. Interiors should guarantee peace and quiet from traffic noise, for example, but we also want to avoid disturbing our neighbours if we have a noisy party. A building shell should also allow us to see from one side to the other. This may be because what is going on outside is more interesting than what is happening inside, for example, or vice versa. Spectators ensconced in a warm VIP lounge at a football stadium want to be able to watch what's going on the pitch below, while shops do everything in their power to ensure that passers-by can gaze spellbound at the enticing goods on display in their windows. Building shells can also be perceived as beautiful or ugly, though it's difficult to reach a consensus on objective criteria for judging these attributes. The aesthetic appeal of a building shell, or lack thereof, is felt both inside and out, and so affects both areas. And of course, a neutral shell can provide a boundary between an attractive interior and a horrible exterior, or vice versa. Summary: the building shell forms the boundary between the environment outside of a building and its interior. Key characteristics of the building shell depend on the environmental conditions prevailing outside of it. They include the ability to keep rain out, to minimize heat loss, and to provide protection against noise and danger. Please take a look at the second film in our Single Skin Facades series, in which we explain what thermal bridges are and how to address them.